In this video, we discuss 5 of the best practices in retirement spending. Are you following all of these? My guess is probably not. Coming up next on Holy Schmidt.
Holy Schmidt!
Recently, I received a recommendation from a subscriber that got me to think. He said, a lot of the money rules out there, particularly around retirement, are what we call motherhood statements where I'm from. Now, for those of you that don't know what a motherhood statement is, it's a statement made typically by a politician about something that is factually correct, reasonably basic in terms of the belief, and impossible to action without a lot more detail. He cited the 50-30-20 rule, the 4% rule, and a few others in his comment. The question I really want to know is, what are people doing right now in their retirement to get the best out of their finances in retirement? Fair question. The problem with most money rules is that more often than not, they're not flexible, they don't factor in taxes, and frankly, they don't always work. It depends on the situation. I responded by saying I'd have something out in a few weeks. That was a few weeks ago, so I am honoring that commitment. But note that the absence of a real plan, a very specific plan, means that a lot of retirees have a lot of stress in their lives, and frankly, they don't get to where they want to go. They're not as happy as they could be. Let's start off with the easiest and probably the most important rule out of all of the money rules out there, and frankly, one of the easiest to action if you just spend a bit of time with it, and that is every dollar has a job. Think about the best run businesses out there. They have very specific rules around how they spend, who they hire, how much they pay. They have a whole manual on what they do. Once all of the expenses are paid by the book, the balance, the profit goes to the shareholders. And if there is no profit, the shareholders get nothing. Now, you don't need to run your home like a business, but that diligence that people have around a small business, some of the skills are very applicable, and they will increase your happiness level in retirement simply by following a roadmap to get from where you are to where you want to go. You don't need to use sophisticated software like businesses use, but at a minimum, you should know where your money goes. You should, for example, know how much you spent on your utility bill last month. If you have rent, how much you paid for your rent, what you paid in medical care, etc. Keeping track of where you spend your money does 2 things. The first is that you know if there's a big variance, at least you know why. And being aware of how you're spending your money will help you when it comes to planning future spending. The next area is your emergency fund. Now, when you were working, if you're already retired, or while you're working, if you are currently working, you spend money on things, or you put money aside for things like your retirement savings. That's a big one, of course. But also you put money aside for college for the kids, for weddings potentially, and a whole host of other things. One of those things is an emergency fund, and if you're not doing it, then it's something you should definitely start doing in retirement. The good news is all of the other elements are probably behind you, at least largely behind you. So the emergency fund savings is about the only one that you need to really focus your time and energy on. Now, I like the 5% rule, if you're going to use a rule at all, and that's 5% of your income goes into the emergency fund each and every month. You do it every month, you do it forever, you don't stop, and at some point in the future, you'll be glad that you continued to save the funds even when you didn't think you needed that amount of money. The next point, absolutely do not carry credit card debt. Now, what's interesting about credit card debt is that it has the highest interest, which means that paying it off even a little bit more than the minimum will have the highest impact. Let me explain. If you have a $5,000 balance on your credit card and you pay 19% interest, your monthly payment is approximately $129.17. Now, the way that I get to that number is 19% of the balance plus 1% of the principal. That's pretty typical for a credit card. The problem is if you pay the minimum every month, you're going to pay that off over 275 months. Now, what if instead of paying the minimum, you paid $130 a month, so 83 cents more than this month's payment, and you pay that out over the life of the balance? Well, that would be 60 months, not 275. How can 83 cents make that much of a difference? The big difference is when you pay down your credit card and you pay the minimum, the balance goes down, which means the minimum goes down. That 1% keeps becoming smaller and smaller, and that's the most impactful part of your payment. But what if you kept it at $130, so 83 cents more? Well, instead of 275 months, it would be 60 months. A big difference. The next point is maintaining a great credit score. Let me explain. A lot of people think that when they reach retirement, they no longer need to worry about their credit score. Their mortgage is either paid off or it's in place, and they're not planning on refinancing it. They have a credit card. It probably has a zero balance. Even if it doesn't have a zero balance, nobody's going to take your credit card away from you if you're making payments on it. At least that's what most people think. The reality is if your credit score goes down, the credit card companies can reevaluate. They don't usually, but they can. But having a good credit score is directly impactful on your purchasing power in retirement. Here's why. When you take out insurance, many times one of the first areas that the insurance company looks at is your credit score. Why? Because if you have a bad credit score, you're more of a risk. If you want to get a part-time job, for example, oftentimes they run a background check that includes your credit score. And by the way, on this point, I have an acquaintance that decided that they wanted to become a gemologist and got certified from GIA, the Gemological Institute of America. They took the courses, cost them a lot of money, and they studied over the course of several years in anticipation of moving down to Florida and getting a job at a really nice jewelry store in an affluent area. The perfect part-time job because it pays well and it doesn't require a lot of your time, except for one thing. If you are in a jewelry store, you're dealing with a lot of really expensive jewelry. For the owner, they have requirements around staff. Sometimes they need to be bonded. Well, in order to be bonded, oftentimes they run a credit check on you. I think you know what happened next. They ran his background check, and part of that background check was his credit check, and he didn't get the job. That's my list of 5, extremely impactful, not all inclusive, of course, but if you aren't following all 5 of these, you'll find that when you do, your purchasing power should go up in retirement. Also, check out this video on 6 purchasing mistakes retirees almost always regret. That video has over 1 million views. It's one of my most popular. This is Jeff Schmidt. Thanks for watching.